2021 was an incredible year for instructional design, and to give back, I'm going to do a Q&A with you, but not just any Q&A. We're going to do something a little bit special because the holidays are approaching. So welcome on in to Luke's holiday Q&A spectacular. Let's get started. Hey folks, and welcome on into the nerdiest video you're going to see today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I asked for your questions on Facebook, LinkedIn, and the mailing list, and all of you delivered. We have some amazing questions to dive on into today, and this very well might be the longest video I think that I have ever produced. I don't know yet because I'm recording this at the start of the video, but my chances are by the end of this, it's going to be kind of long. So FYI, I'm going to break this down into different segments so you can go on ahead and look down below in the YouTube description and actually see a little different types of timestamps, and then go on over to the topic that you're really interested in. Or, of course, if you want us to learn everything, literally everything about instructional design, then stick around for however long this video is, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about your topic. So let's dive on into the first question, shall we? And our first question comes from James, and James asks, what should IDs caution against as they work towards adding immersive experiences into their courses? What are some lessons learned from rapid authoring tools that we should take into the metaverse? Well, that is a doozy of a question, James, but it's a great question. And what I want you to think about first, think of the very first time that you ever used a smartphone, whether it was an iPhone or a Droid. When you first had this thing in your hand, wasn't it kind of weird? You had to adapt to it. You had to figure out what to do, where to go. What the heck is an app store? How do I make a password? What is a lock screen? And everything else that comes with it. And even I guarantee right now, but if you are an iPhone user and then you were to go and try to use a Droid, you would have literally no idea how to use the thing. I've tried. I have iPhones. I've always had iPhones and Macs, and I try to go back to a PC or to using a Droid, like a friend's phone gives it to me. I can't do anything with that. It's basically a brick. I don't know how to use it. And that is what I'm thinking about when it comes to everything with headsets. So what I imagine is that as we're getting used to either an Oculus or any other different form of a headset, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable at first. There's going to be a learning period. You're going to have to figure out what to do, how to make everything work. Now, on top of that, we as instructional designers and educators, we're thinking about how do we be able to create a safe learning space for somebody inside of here. And that just takes things to a whole different level. So going back to your question, you were talking about, well, what do we be cautious about? What do I need to kind of know before I start doing this? And what I would really advise you to start thinking about would be, how are you going to be able to prepare somebody to be able to comfortably use this and essentially not even think about the fact that they're actually wearing a headset? That's the goal. You're trying to be able to have somebody make this feel so comfortable and so normal that they're like, oh, this is a different part of my day, just like how I use my phone or how I brush my teeth. I wear my headset and that's where I take classes. That is where we're trying to go. So what does this mean? I guarantee we're going to have to build out different types of things as far as for tutorials, activities, even preparing like a type of a week 0 within a module within the type of a course, just to be able to say like, this is how you charge the headset. This is how you go to the store. This is how you walk around. It's like, I'm sure that's what's going to happen, especially when it comes to the metaverse. Now, everything that I've seen so far with the metaverse does look pretty easy to use. I have not personally used it myself, but from seeing a couple of different videos of watching people be able to actually scan in their desks to be able to have a video embedded into their type of Oculus or whatever headset they're using, and then being able to have these different types of sensors in their hands so that way there is this like a physical sense within the virtual world. And that's kind of the entire idea of the metaverse, is allowing somebody to feel like there is a completely normal working environment. We are just kind of avatar looking characters. But seeing as the fact is that they do already have different types of classrooms and whiteboards and different ways to have your like arranged seating and like everything else that's already inside of there that I'm currently seeing, it really doesn't surprise me to hear that people like Bill Gates are talking about how in 3 years from now, this is going to become the standard way of how we are hosting meetings And I don't doubt that. Now, before we get into that point, though, there's going to be plenty of people who need to be able to kind of ramp up and understand what exactly is this really going to be looking like, not just the learners, but also instructional designers. So if you wanted to be able to start dabbling just to learn a little bit more before you've been thrown on into literally everything with what is in store for us in the future, I would recommend to look at Unity. I'd recommend to look at VR Studio, looking at Ready Player Me. Those are a couple of different things that you can start to use right now and test out and just to see exactly what it's like. And it's really interesting too, because we're not even at the place yet as far as for telling people that they can't go off of camera when it comes to Zoom meetings. People get all upset about it. But what is really to currently stop us from allowing students to say, like, wow, I am so burned out from being on camera constantly. What if I wanted my own little type of avatar to be able to be talking for me on Zoom? So instead of me, it's something else. And that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And you can actually see there is an entire movement of people doing this right now on YouTube called VTubers, where people are actually making videos of themselves on YouTube. And it's them in the background, but you can't tell because it's the type of a little cutesy animal character or an anime character or something else. So let's start diving on into those things because they are ready, they're accessible, you can use them, you can actually download them right away. And then I would take one step further if you're trying to learn a little bit more about everything with the metaverse and everything that is to come. That will be a part of your entire learning journey, but start with some things that are readily at hand for now. And then let's dive on in deeper as you are progressing and understanding how everything is actually going to work. Our next question comes from Alicia, and Alicia asks, how do I negotiate buy-in from deans when we, the instructional design team, note their courses really need to be updated for better content delivery? The content is fine, but the delivery is aged and could be updated, but too often we're met with no, it's fine, quote unquote. So, Alicia, what I want you to do is to think about it from the dean's perspective. What are they really saying when they say it's fine? Because it's fine to me is basically saying that either they don't have the time or the resources or the budget, or they have something currently else going on, like in the background of a project that is just like weighing on their minds. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're really going to throw one more project on top of my to-do list. There's no way that I can possibly supervise this and make sure that this is going to go into effect. And that to me is what it's fine really means. We're just trying to be able to say, no, not now. We'll revisit it later. But you, as the amazing instructional designer, says, but hey, we really need to do this and we need to think about it now and not later. So, what this dean or the deans really need to be able to hear is hard, credible data from both the students and the instructors, and not just from one perspective. In order to really sell this idea of saying that you really need to be able to go back and revise these, you're going to need both. And the reason being is because if the students are unhappy, let's say that like your entire student evaluation at the end of a term of the semester, you do something with a Likert scale of 1 through 5 for a student satisfaction survey or something along those lines. And let's say that you're getting threes. You're like, all right, we're getting threes for a type of a general answer. I wonder what's going on. And then you can go and actually talk more with the instructors, whether by surveys or interviews or whatnot, and to try to be able to think about more with them of like, hey, we're hearing that the courses are kind of just okay. Do you have any ideas as far as what we can do to make this better? Is there anything that you were told no before and now you want to be able to go and use your creativity and do something a bit different now that you have been teaching the course for a couple of terms or semesters? Any instructor is probably going to have ideas. I know that when I've taught courses for the first semester and then later on, and like even by the end of the first semester, I'm like, wow, I could have done something a lot differently if I had really known and had this feedback from students ahead of time. So I guarantee that they have ideas too. So now you're going to be able to have the student data and the instructor feedback, their data, and you can put them together. And then now is the appropriate time to do your sales pitch. And in this sales pitch, what you should be able to do is to one, address the problem by saying, hey, our courses really need to be revised. But then say, I've heard from both students and from faculty, I've been talking to both of them, doing some interviews, collecting some data that I wanted to be able to share with you because I was really curious to hear more about how we can actually just revise the courses and to make them better. And from speaking with these faculty, I actually was able to pinpoint precisely what modules or what assessments really do need the most amount of love and the most amount of help. And this is the idea of how we can go about with doing this and how we can make it a reality. And then at the end of all of that, you should be talking about the ROI, the return on investment for not just for your team and for the dean, but also talking about the students, the instructor, and overall the institution by talking about how you're going to be able to increase student satisfaction from the courses by going back to, say, like that Likert scale of the 1 through 5. You had a 3 for an average. Let's say that the new goal is that you want to be able to have at least a 3.5 or a 4 for going forwards for the next couple of months to be able to assess and evaluate, and then to go back and revise them again if need be. But that entire sales pitch of what you're trying to be able to say is that you've identified the problem, you have an idea for the solution, you're able to pinpoint exactly where the solution is going to take place, and most importantly, talking about the importance of everything of, well, why is this goal really going to be able to help us to do better for the students, the instructors, literally everybody else, and for our school in general. So, Alicia, that's what I would do if I were you, if I were in your shoes. I would be trying to be able to do all this data collection and everything else ahead of time, present to them the hard facts, the ideas, and then to hopefully have their blessing and their sign off to say, sounds great, go ahead and do the thing. The other thing on top of all of that, too, is that if you are talking with the dean, and let's say that they open up as far as you're talking about how much time that they don't have, that they're committing so much time to other projects, or perhaps it's a budget issue. If you're able to identify what the issue is, that is also going to really be able to help you out. Because if they're assuming, let's just say hypothetically, that they are assuming that everything for the review process is going to have to go back to them, well, does it have to go to that dean, or could it go to an associate dean or an assistant dean or somebody else ahead of time first, as far as for that first passage to be able to give the approval, say this looks great, hey, let's now go run it by this actual dean, and then they can say yay or nay and go from there. If you're able to kind of take a little bit off of their plate and to help them with the process to move things along, kind of the whole like, well, what's in it for me idea, that can really make things go a long way too. So if that does come up and you can identify that problem, that's going to really help out. If any of that long rambling does make sense about working with SMEs and you want to know more about my tips, I have an entire course about how to work with SMEs and everything that I've learned over the years. And that's over at EduFlow Academy. Our new cohort for the program, by the way, starts in February, and then we're going to have another one later on in March. So go down below, sign up for the next one, and I can't wait to see you there. And speaking of SMEs, I spoke too soon. There's another question about SMEs, so let's tackle this one. This one comes in from Julia. And Julia says, I struggle daily to gain fluency and general engineering topics to understand our products and their foundations. How do I clarify the boundaries between what I need to know and what the SMEs deliver? More importantly, and this is in bold, so it's very important, how do I encourage the SMEs to deliver when I solicit content? So, Julia, funny enough, you kind of said the answer in the question, and that is that you need to be able to set boundaries. But of course, I understand what your question is talking about, well, how is the approach? How do I actually do this? And the way that I approach this is that when I first meet somebody who is going to become my subject matter expert, we actually talk within the first type of introduction meeting as far as for why I'm on the project and why they're on the project and how we're going to be working together. So we openly discuss about what each other is bringing to the table as far as for their value. Why are you on this project? So I'm over here talking about how it's just like, well, I'm here to help out with everything for online learning. I have all these different types of ideas, and I want to be able to make an amazing, incredible online learning experience that's going to help out our students and help out our learners. But I am not the subject matter expert. I need to work with you to be able to tell me more about this subject matter and this content and these topics, because simply put, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. So together, when we put our heads together, this is what's really going to be able to help everything deliver a final product. So first piece of advice for you is kind of like the what I wish I knew before becoming this type of a job, is to be able to have this open communication of talking about their value, your value, and what each other's assignments and responsibilities are for the entire project itself. And while you might be thinking that this is kind of an odd conversation to have, especially if engineers, they appreciate it. They want to be able to know exactly what they're doing, what you're doing, and they want to be able to get rid of that gray area. And also going into that is a part of the second question, as far as we're saying, well, how do I get essentially the SMEs to deliver the goods? How do I get them to actually do their jobs when it's helping me this entire project? So first thing is first is that I share with my SMEs a type of an entire timetable as far as for the project scope, a blueprint, the course outline. I give to them exactly what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and when is everything due. And I make sure that everything is divided up into these different types of hard deliverables for every week or every 2 weeks or so, just so that that way we're once again on the same page. And knowing too that if we do miss a date or two, and then all of a sudden we have things pushed back by either, a couple of weeks or months or whatever it is, then this very much is not going to become the product that we're originally intending it to become. And what I would also ask this SME too is that if they are not delivering the different types of content and deliverables, well, then asking more about why. What is actually happening? Has something come up at work? Do they have a new project that they weren't experiencing? What is currently going on? Because if the solution is the fact that they just need more assistance, they need another hand, is there a junior SME which you can bring on as far as for another engineer or for a grad student or for what? I'm not sure of your industry if you have students, but if you do have junior SMEs, it would make a ton of sense to be able to try to go and to have somebody to work with first before then going to then becoming like the lead SME and asking them to give you the final approval and to see what ideas they're going to bring to the table. And then you can move on to the next part. The other thing I would be asking about too is more about just how do they prefer to work? Because if you set up a type of a working environment that makes plenty of sense to you as far as for like, well, this is what I do, this is how I know to get things done, this is how I operate. But then when you talk to them and you're like, well, tell me your style. What do you prefer to do as far as for with hours? And when are you the best as far as with your creativity? Is in the morning or the afternoon or the evening? Tell me about what you currently have going on outside of this for projects, just so that way I have an idea of what exactly is going on in the background. Instead of me guessing, I'll know what's currently going on in your world. When you have more of those bits and pieces of information, that's really going to help to inform you as far as for saying either like, hey, I need to smash that red help button right now because this person is just MIA and I don't know what's happening. Or you're like, oh, that's right. This other project they're working on is currently happening at the same time. So I can probably count on the fact that once that's done, we're going to be able to move much quicker once that has passed by. So there's a couple of different things I would try to do as far as for understanding the entire bigger picture when working with the SME. And that is going to help you as far as for like with everything for going forwards on the project. And the final thing I would say, just to kind of put a bow on everything, would be, do they understand what is being asked of them? Do they actually get it? Because if they don't, and let's say that they are either overcompensating by trying to do more, or the opposite, where they're like, I have no idea, it's her problem, and they push it back on you, well, that's really not going to go well either way. So when you are having different types of either weekly or bi-weekly meetings with them, which is what I would always encourage you to do, just to make sure you're always on the same page and you're on task with the project, is to talk openly about, hey, like since the last time we've been able to meet, tell me more about the assignment that you made. What have you been thinking about? What have you done? Or what article did you find that really made a ton of sense that we need to be able to talk about for today? Or let's talk about your next recording session. Tell me about the topics that you want to be able to do. And that way I can try to be able to align everything across the board for everything else that we're thinking about for the assessments, the activities, and so on and so forth. So also trying to be able to just figure out, is there an issue with understanding about what they're trying to do is something else you really need to uncover. So unfortunately, Julie, I'm giving you like a lot of other questions to be able to answer this, but I would want to be able to go and poke and prod more and just understand more about the background, the bigger picture, what's currently going on in this person's world, what do they think about for the project. But for going forwards, I would highly advise you to be able to think about the structure of the introducing part with the SME, the kickoff call, what exactly you're going to be talking about, and make sure that everything is out and open on the table, just so that that way everybody knows what they're going to be doing for the project itself. The next question comes from Amber, and Amber says, podcasts, what is the name of your program? I've been looking for a new ID podcast to listen to. Now, this question is kind of a joke, but it's just really funny to me. This is why I wanted to include it in here, because the amount of people who I talk to who only listen to the podcast or the amount of people I talk to will only watch on YouTube, and then they don't know that there is another platform behind the scenes. So it's just super funny to me, and hearing from some people too, where they're like, "Oh, that's what you look like. I have no idea." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's true. I guess if you've never added me on LinkedIn, or have actually Googled what I look like, and all you do is listen to the podcast, then yeah, you have no idea what I look like," which is really, really funny to me. So once again, I just want to say thank you for all of you who listen to the podcast, the YouTube, blog, read the book, or anything else that you've done for all my crazy learning nerd stuff. It's amazing that all of you have been following along with me for this entire journey, and can't wait to make 2022 even better. Our next question comes from Rula, and Rula says, "Oh, can't believe it's already the end of 2021. I know, it's crazy. I can't believe that either. Learn tons from your posts, podcasts, and videos. Thanks a lot." Well, thank you, Rula, for taking the time to go and to learn from all of these different types of platforms. I appreciate you. My question is, if you had to choose between working as an ID freelancer or full-time L&D developer for one company, what would it be? So, Rula, the timing of your question is super interesting, because I heard from an organization the other day, and they basically said to me, "What would it take to make you leave MIT?" It was a roundabout way. And I had to sit there and I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I'm perfectly happy with where I'm at and what I do." I'm like, "I don't know. I'm really, really not looking to go anywhere or do anything." But then I was talking with my wife afterwards, and she thought the same thing, where she said that, where she was like, "Yeah, like what would it take?" I have no idea. I'm all set. So I do not know what on earth it could possibly be, because I love education. I love helping out students, and clearly I love teaching, which is why I'm making these videos too. So I don't know. I don't know what that would be. But if I had to, if you're forcing me to try to be able to leave higher ed and go somewhere else, I think what I would do, yeah, I think what I would do would be that I would start my own instructional design company. So I would go and round up all of the best and brightest instructional designers that I know of, and we would make a team, and we would just go and crush it out there by making incredible online learning experiences as one unit. I think that's what I would do, because I'm realizing the more and more that I work on my own projects by myself as an entrepreneur, which is something I'm still trying to be able to actually say out loud, which is weird. But thinking more about that too, it is really lonely. Like, my gosh, I'm already working from home since everything happened with the pandemic. And while I talk to a lot of you on LinkedIn, Facebook, and a bunch of other different types of platforms too, it still is thinking about, like, well, if I didn't have any of that, like if I'm just working by myself, I don't have anyone for my team or for students or for anyone else. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It would be really weird. So I wouldn't want to do freelance by myself. So it would have to be a part of a team. And the only way for me to do that would be that I would need to form a team of amazing, awesome people. And I couldn't say no to just a few of them. So I would make my own super team of instructional designers. And that's probably what I would do. And if I had to pick one company, I'm trying to think, because I'm like, yeah, it'd be really cool to work at like Apple, Google, Tesla, or something like big like that. I'm sure that would be fun. I think though, no, what I would do would be that I would go and try to be able to be the instructional designer for the armed forces. If there was servicemen and women that I can go and develop a product around, or a course or training, or whatever it is, I would, yeah, I would jump all aboard that. I've been able to work with some incredible folks in the military, and yeah, if I could do that full time, that would be a meaningful learning experience to me, to know that I am helping out people over here in my country. So that'd be my answer. And our next questions come from Marie. And Marie says, "How did the pandemic change instructional design? What would be your approach if you were asked to take an instructor-led all-day course to a virtual one of the same length and with the same content? Please let me know if you need any clarifying. No, please let me know if I need to clarify the second question, winky face." So, hilarious emoji, by the way. But so, Marie, to answer your first question, how the pandemic changed instructional design? How did it not change instructional design? It's crazy. I mean, right now, you're watching a YouTube video about a Q&A session on instructional design. Would you honestly be watching this from a couple of years ago? Probably not. It's crazy to see just the entire like gold rush, if you will, of instructional design, this boom that happened that as soon as the pandemic really started to show its face, all of a sudden we had to think about remote learning and emergency learning. And then from the byproduct of that became folks knowing about real proper online learning. And then that is where we are today. And what I always find so fascinating when it comes to talking with people trying to enter into the instructional design field for the first time is that I always keep on hearing where it's like, oh, instructional design is new. I'm like, no, no, it's not. It's actually been around since World War II, if you can believe that. This is when thousands upon thousands of soldiers were trained in a type of cohesive manner. And this really did just take off after this. Then, of course, we're going to have notable different types of learning theorists and researchers from Skinner to Bloom, as most of you know about Bloom's taxonomy, along with Gagne and Merrill. So we have all these different types of learning theorists begin to emerge. Then we actually have in the 1980s the launch of the first ever type of public computer-based training program called Plato. This is the very first beginning of e-learning, if you will, quote unquote, if I can call it that. And then if we're going to fast forward a little bit in 2000, we had the online learning boom. This really started to take off. You began to see commercials talking about going back to school online, which were popping up constantly. And then this idea of remote learning finally emerged in 2020, along with high flex learning. And then finally, where we're at currently today, which is like the instructional design boom. So how did this change instructional design? Well, the biggest thing is that it made people aware about what it is that we actually do. I think that's by far the craziest thing, is that for years, when I introduce myself to other people and say that I'm an instructional designer, I always receive the response of somebody looking at me like I have three heads, and they're like, what do you do? Like, what is your job? Like, why are you here on this project? I'm like, yeah, I know. I had to become used to introducing myself constantly and then saying what it is that I actually do and why I'm on a project working with other people. And now when I'm telling people and I say that I'm an instructional designer, I don't really get those looks anymore. People seem to know what it is that I do, which is kind of cool. So what did the pandemic do? What would change instructional design as far as for building awareness? And now more than ever, people are trying to be able to hire instructional designers. Every single major organization is hiring for an instructional designer. And you can just go and actually look about it on LinkedIn jobs and search instructional design. And you're going to see that every organization you know and love is hiring for an instructional designer, and their teams are constantly growing and growing. And then obviously everyone is trying to figure out, well, now how do I become an instructional designer? And the current instructional designers who already exist are trying to be able to think about their next steps as far as for becoming leaders and growing a team and doing more and expanding and everything else too. So it very much has changed pretty much everything about instructional design, to answer the question. And now to answer your second question, which is basically how do you take a face-to-face course and you want to flip it online, but you want to make it better? This is what I would do. And before I go into any of those steps, by the way, I have an entire guide on how to do this. drlukehobson.com. It will give you the outline of a step-by-step guide as far as for what exactly I would do if I was in your shoes. And you can find that down below in the show notes and the description of everything for the video. But first thing is first, you are going to have some kind of syllabus, and you obviously have access to the professor. So you're going to want to be able to do the combination of the two, to take the information that they currently have and to talk with them and to create your own type of outline. You can call it an outline or a blueprint or whatever you want to be able to call it. But this is basically talking about the course description, the students as far as for the population, the learning outcomes, and just overall everything with the intended goals of the course itself. So if I were you, this is what I would do. I would take the syllabus and I would start to really work with this, but at the same time, make sure you still have access to the professor, because you're definitely going to need to be able to talk to this person. But I would take the syllabus and I would flip it into more of a overall general outline of things as far as for having the course description, learning outcomes, the student population, anything necessary to make sure that you are on the same page with the professor. Next, I would talk with them and try to be able to understand more about the overall assignments. So, what final project or projects at the end of the week, let's say, what are they really working on? What are they working towards? Now, whether this is going to be an overall final project, as in a group presentation or an essay or it could be a variety of different things. I would just want to know more about what exactly are they doing at the end of the course, because we're going to take this entire approach and we're going to do it backwards. I like trying to be able to go and start with the end in mind and then work my way backwards, which is essentially backward design in a nutshell. So starting with the goals, starting with the overall assessments, and then from there, learning more about what exactly these people are doing. Because then, of course, the biggest thing is that if you have something where it is more difficult to do, as far as for like, hey, in person, they go up in front of a class and they talk about a presentation, or there's a debate, or they critique one another's work, or whatever it is. Well, then, okay, if we're going to have them do that, then we need to talk more about accessibility. We need to be able to talk about recording video. We need to make sure that the platform can handle whatever it actually is. There's a number of different things to go into play there to make sure that you can take the idea of the project. And that's kind of the whole point. You're taking the idea of the project, but then making it more into the format and the delivery that is more appropriate for the online sense. Then once you know that the project and the assessments, once you know that these can be done in the online way, then I would try to make an overall course map. So I would break down the modules by the weeks, as far as for what exactly the professor was talking about for that week, and really have a sense of the lesson, the goals, what they covered, the readings, what exactly were they doing within the courses for the weeks themselves. And I would map that out into different types of modules. And I say that word for a reason too, because it's not always going to be the same sense of week one is always going to have week one's content. Because let's say if week one was like super heavy with content, but week two is lighter, well, then you're going to have to try to think about the balancing act of like, well, I can't ask them for every single week to dedicate the same amount of time. If in theory, week one is 5 hours, but then week two is 1 hour, and then week three goes into 10 hours, like you want to have that established balance to make sure that students aren't just like lost and confused and trying to figure out what the heck is really going on from week to week to week. So map out the weeks and try to break it down into an Excel spreadsheet. I would keep it extremely simple. And I use Excel spreadsheets or a Google spreadsheet, whatever the professor is comfortable with working with. One of those two, I'm going to assume, is going to suffice, and try to break it down into different types of blocks. So if they were going to be, by they, the students, if they were going to be reading a chapter for the week, and then they're going to be watching a video, then they're going to do a discussion, then a practice question, and then they're going to be able to submit the milestone for the week, let's say. Well, then I want that mapped out on the actual Google Sheet, because then we can try to figure out, does everything now align? Are we still hitting the same outcome, the same goals, as far as with how we have now flipped it into a different type of way? And if yes, then fantastic. Then move on to the next week and keep on going down until everything really does align and everything does make sense. And then you can take this entire course map and you can put it into your learning management system, depending upon what you're using. But like, it's all fine. You can just really take the same ideas and then to go and really copy and paste them over into the learning management system. Now, to help your professor, by the way, because every single professor I've ever talked to about flipping their course is always this like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? You don't need to have them record the video, obviously, all in one sitting. And that's kind of the entire point, which is what we know too about anything with learning science, by the way, is that we want to make sure that this is something like a 5 to 10 minute video per page on the module. And that is what's going to make it so that that way the students aren't getting crushed by watching an hour and a half long lecture. If the professor is coming into that mindset of saying, oh, I have to deliver everything all at once, well, there's absolutely no problem with you recording the entire session. But hey, FYI, we're going to break it down into different types of pieces just so that that way people can consume content at the rate at which they feel comfortable with. And we're not trying to just kind of cram it all into an hour and a half long session, because you have no idea. You have no idea about what the people are currently experiencing from behind the scenes, what type of commitments they already have, jobs, families, and everything else too. So the whole entire mantra of like, oh, you must watch my hour and a half long video at the start of everything. It's just really not practical, especially if you're doing something like that every single week, people aren't going to be engaged. So once you can break that down into different blocks and help them see that too, by the way, because as we're talking about their lectures, you can try to be able to pinpoint exactly what topics they cover, where, when, and how, and why. And you can make sure that that is aligned into the course mapping activity. And that's going to help them understand the course about knowing exactly what students are going to be going through and helping you understand the course just to make sure that it does indeed make sense for what you want to do. Now, Marie, I would suggest to definitely go and read that article, by the way, over on my website, because it has way more details and visuals and other steps. But for now, it's a general gist of what it is that I would do if I was in your shoes. Now, this next question comes from so many of you, but I didn't just pick one name because I constantly am asked this question at least, I want to say once a week. And this is the question, or some variety of the type of a question. And it goes basically like, was your PhD worth it? Do you recommend me to get a doctorate? What types of opportunities came about from everything with your doctorate? Now, here is my answer. I cannot tell you yes or no. There is no blanket answer. There is never going to be a type of absolute answer of yes, you should go back to school, or no, you shouldn't. Because everyone, different backgrounds, different experiences, different goals, a PhD or an EDD isn't for everybody. And of course, it shouldn't be, because if you don't need it, well, then that's kind of like questioning about, well, why do you want it in the first place if it's not going to help you with getting a job? Of course, if it's going to help you with your career or for where you want to go in the future for a 5-year, 10-year, whatever longer plan, then that may make sense. It really does depend upon the goals and what you want to do. And of course, what you think about when it comes to just education in general. Because if you value and you love education, you love going back to school, then like, great, I'm not going to stop you. But you really need to think about this from an individual basis of, does it make sense for you? Now, for me, getting a doctorate was worth it. And the reason why I actually went for my doctorate in the first place, and you can actually see the original status I posted back in 2013 of when I was going to school. And I was saying about how I can't wait to be called Dr. Luke Hobson, and I'm so excited to pursue things. And I did not think I would be making videos on the internet about instructional design almost 10 years later. So yeah, fun fact. Anyway, but when I went to apply for everything with my EDD, the goal was that I wanted to become a dean. Like, that was the goal. It was not to become an instructional designer until I started to network with more instructional designers and learn what the heck it is that they actually do for a job. And then that kind of opened my eyes. But originally, I wanted to become a dean. That is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an instructor, then work my way up to dean. And I knew that I needed to have a doctorate in order to do that. I have plenty of friends who were deans that had to go back to school later on in life. And they were like, oh my gosh, I wish I had done this sooner. So as soon as I was talking with them saying, hey, I think I want to do this, they were all in agreement of, well, then go back to school. You need a doctorate if you want to become a dean at a major university. It is what it is. Just go do it now. So off I went and I applied and I got in. And my initial assumption about everything was that just the degree alone is going to help me. And that is not true. Nobody cares if you just have the piece of paper. It looks great. Yeah, you can call yourself a doctor and woo, but the entire thing about that is more about, well, what did you learn? What were your experiences? Who did you make connections with? How did you build your network? What professors taught you? Like, there's so much that goes into here as far as you're figuring out what was your overall learning experience with the doctorate, and then what did you do with that? And of course, what can you do with this new information that can go and help out an organization or, something else in that type of capacity? So no one is going to say like, super, you got the nice and shiny white piece of paper, you're great. It's not really how it works. So what I did do that I found incredibly helpful is that I took what I was learning about from the classroom and I started to apply it into my day job as much as humanly possible. So when it came down time to trying to be able to go and revise online courses, I took everything I learned about from the mixed methodology that I used for my research. That's now how I currently revise courses at MIT and how I train other people to do it. As far as for how to fix online courses, I found a model that worked by essentially taking what I was learning about on the job, combining that with the entire methodology from my dissertation. I put it together and was like, hey, here we go. This makes a lot of sense. We should do this for going forwards. When I was going through the interviewing process, I took what I was learning about from my comps, my comprehensive exams. And I took that type of information and I brought it with me to interviews. So if someone was asking me about questions on gamification, adaptive learning, or like anything else for what the 21st century learner is going to need for going forwards, I could accurately answer that and give them a ton of information. And I went as even far as for with the interviewing process of using whiteboards and scribbling it down just to show them in the interview of like, I know what I'm talking about because I had to take comps. I had to pass these hardest exams that I will probably never take. As long as I live, nothing will ever come close to those, the difficulty of those exams. But I learned so much and I still retain this information to this day. So was getting a doctor worth it for me? Yes, it was. It helped me out. It helped me with the interviewing process. It helped me eventually become an instructional designer. It helped me with networking. It helped me with a variety of different things that I would never have access to the opportunities if I didn't go through the entire learning experience with everything that I learned about from with being a part of my cohort, from the exams to the dissertation process and to above and beyond. So yes, it did help me out. Yes, to me, it was worth it. But for you, once again, it is not an absolute answer. But if you want to be able to think about this more of like, well, is it worth it for me? Should I do this? I have an entire YouTube video as well too talking about this. So watch that video first to talk about those steps and learn from them. But to shorten that entire thing for you is that you really should be connecting with everybody to see, is this program right for you? So by that, I want you to connect with the current students. Are they happy? Do they find the information relevant? Do they feel a sense of accomplishment and reward of everything that they're currently going through with the program? Talk to graduates of the program. Same thing. Are they happy about everything? Where are they now? Did it help them find a job? Did it help them accomplish their goals? Because, of course, if they say, no, it didn't really help me, or like, I kind of regret things, well, then, hey, there's your sign to not go for that PhD at that school specifically. And then, of course, talk with the folks that work there, the directors, the instructors, the professors, the administrators, whoever is going to give you the time of day. Talk with them to learn more about their program, the benefits about it, and why you should go there in the first place. They should be trying to be able to persuade you to show how awesome and how fantastic their program is. That's what it's really all about. That was really my convincing point when thinking about my EDD program, as far as for like, do I want to actually go here? Yes or no? Well, it was the fact that I reached out to the director. She offered me an opportunity to come in and shadow for the day. And I was able to have a kind of like a coffee chat with her in between the breaks of the courses. But I was there from 8 to 5 o'clock talking with students at different levels and just seeing about, did they really enjoy it? So I talked to folks who are just entering in the program, and I talked to folks who are working on their dissertations and they were already like kind of at the end of their entire academic journey. By doing that, I was able to have all my questions answered. I could see the enthusiasm. I could see that this was going to be the place that was going to help me. So then I made that correct decision. But I would never just go and look at a school online and say, that looks good, and go for it. So please do your homework and make sure before you go and spend years of your life to do something as far as with research, of course, spending thousands of more dollars and putting yourself literally into stress. It's a stressful process. I mean, very rewarding and awesome, but let's be honest, it's a ton of work. So before you go through all of those things, please think about the bigger picture and do your homework. And then finally, our last question comes from Allah, and Allah says, "Hi, Luke, really enjoy your book and podcast. My favorite part is the tasks you give after each unit." Well, thank you. I'm glad that you are actually doing those activities. If you have the book and you're not doing the activities, you're not getting as much value out of the book as you possibly could. FYI, just a reminder, do your homework. Yeah, close enough. We'll call that homework. Anyway, I'll also say it's so helpful, not just to absorb the content, but to actually take the time and to think about it. By the way, it's very easy to read your book and listen to the podcast, even for not native speakers. Thank you. Of course, I'm so glad that it's easier for you. So my suggestions about the actual topic of the letter. What are your development goals for 2022? Which one is instructional design related? What one new thing are you looking forward to exploring in 2022? How do you measure success? What is your big recommendation to yourself at the beginning of 2022? Thank you for the opportunity to give ideas. Have a nice podcast. Unicorn emoji. Okay. Great questions. Let me try to do this in a more of a rapid fire round because I know this video is super long at this point in time. My goals by far is to increase everything as far as with podcast, the blog, and everything else that I do online of producing instructional design content. My for sure goal is to be able to try to do a more productive way of getting things done. I know that for a lot of you, you don't know about the behind the scenes as far as for like how I do everything with the podcast, but I usually do it as like a individual case by case basis for like each episode or each blog or each YouTube video. And what I know from some friends who are podcasters, they are able to crush things as far as for doing podcast episodes. Let's say they'll record like 14 in 1 month and then they're done. So that way it's planned and ready and good to go to launch at the appropriate time in the future because they did batch recordings at different points of time. And that to me is like, yeah, I probably should do that because it is really hard to be able to juggle everything that I do for a full-time job, teaching, and all the other different things I do along the side of producing content. It's definitely difficult to manage different points of time, but that's what I love to do. So obviously, I'll dedicate as much time as possible to keep on doing this and to keep on serving you and to helping you in the instructional design community. But I need to be smarter with my approaches. So that is definitely goal number one. As far as for, all right, let's think about this. There's like 4 questions. As far as for exploring more things in 2022, what am I looking forward to? I think was something what the question was saying. I have been absolutely obsessed with how the new course is going with working with SMEs over in EduFlow Academy. That has been awesome. I love cohort-based models. My entire doctorate was a cohort. So I love this idea of bringing people together and having people be able to network with one another, to make friends, to be able to bounce ideas off of one another. And when EduFlow and we were talking about like this entire process of what would this course look like? How would it go? What do you want to do? And with their learning platform, which is EduFlow, by the way, is the learning management system, with using that, I knew that I didn't have any restrictions. So that was what was so fascinating, where I had this idea of like, if I really did think about it from like, if I want to create exactly what I wanted to do, and I was the instructional designer, I was the SME and the instructor, what would it look like? What would the overall online learning experience be? And it is the entire final product of what the course became. I wanted to be a cohort-based model. I wanted to use GatherTown because I love the idea of us creating avatars, going into a virtual space and being able to hang out with one another and, of course, work together on whiteboards, but then we can have fireside chats next to a virtual fireplace. And it's so cool to bring people together. And it has 1000% fought off the entire Zoom fatigue kind of thing. As soon as all the students within the course, were logged into the GatherTown session for the first time, it was clear that there wasn't this Zoom burnout. People were happy to be on camera. They were excited to talk with one another. They went out into their own breakout rooms together, which is fantastic. And it was an organic type of thing that I wasn't trying to be able to go and make people talk. It was like a natural conversation. And then, of course, we're using Circle as our platform for our type of a community platform for a discussion. So there is a discussion board within the platform itself, but we're able to use Circle as far as for having something that's also more like user-friendly and looks great and functions great as far as for having a real and appropriate communication platform, kind of like of a Slack, if you will, but it just looks cleaner and it works better. So everything that I wanted to do within the course, I've been able to do. And I can't wait to honestly keep on doing more and more of these cohorts throughout 2022, just because I know how much value that people are getting out of the course, but also the entire fact that they're making friends with one another. They're talking with other instructional designers. They're working on projects together. That's been so awesome to see. So I cannot wait to do that more. Let's see. Okay. Then you asked about how do I measure my success? I thought it was just measuring success like in the classroom, but no, you asked about how do I measure my success, which is a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked about that before. My success, I would say that it's my happiness. It's my level of excitement and passion. And am I still in it? I've been doing this now for what feels like a while, but I know it's only been a couple of years of producing content online with the blog, podcast, YouTube, and then the book, which was, fantastic to really see that take off. And we're about to approach I honestly, I don't even know how many sales to approach. It's way more than I thought, to tell you the truth. So I could say like I measure my success by how many people have purchased the book and how many of people have signed up for the courses or how many downloads I have. And don't get me wrong, I love data. I love analytics. So numbers to me are so cool to see, and it definitely helps as far as for with tracking, like, am I on point? Did I connect with you as far as for different things? But it's definitely like that level of satisfaction and happiness of hearing from you, from people who have purchased the book and said that this was their favorite chapter, or you tagged me in something on Twitter or LinkedIn about, an idea and now you're using something, or you found an old video and something like whatever your enjoyment level is. I try to be able to make sure that I am matching that at all times, just to know that way of like, hey, I'm on track. They're happy. I'm happy. Life is good. As far as measuring my own success within like the professional space as an instructional designer, I'm already having a title that I never thought I would have. So this is kind of like it's all cool from here. Whatever it is, I am happy in my current role. And it kind of goes back to the whole point of like, what would I need to do as far as for leaving my organization and going to something else? And it's rare to actually be able to say now at my life at 33 of like, I have the right job. I have an incredible leader. I work for a great organization. I'm never told the word no as far as for any crazy idea I might have. So I'm pretty happy. Life is honestly really, really good. And then finally, last question, the very, very last question of the Q&A. What is the big recommendation? Is that we said? Yes. What is your big recommendation to yourself at the beginning of 2022? Oh, let's see. It would be to stop saying the word yes. Now, I know that's kind of odd, but I have found myself saying yes to every opportunity under the sun that I've, ever come across throughout my entire journey, which has been amazing. And I would highly, highly recommend that all of you do the same. It doesn't matter about your background or your level of degree or, whatever it is. If you are passionate and you have the expertise to be able to go and help people, then I would definitely tell you to be able to just say yes to whatever opportunity comes your way. I have heard from a bunch of you about how you had potentially an opportunity to do a conference, but you felt too scared to do it, or you had an opportunity to go and to write a paper with somebody, and you're like, I don't know, and it's leaving that comfort zone. And if you have, once again, the expertise and the passion to do it, then you should go for it. So you should be saying yes to opportunities. For me, I need to be more careful and selective about things. And I started to do that because as I kept on being like, yeah, I'd love to do your thing. And like, yeah, of course I'll do this talk. There was, I can't remember what week it was, but I had something going on every single day. And for some of them, it was like 2 events a day. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna burn out. There's no way I can keep on doing this and try to do it well, which is the other thing too. It's not just a fact about timing. It's more of if I'm going to be giving a presentation or a workshop or whatever it is, I want to be able to make sure that I'm giving you 110% at all times. I refuse to show up with like a 50% version of myself trying to be able to help out other people. This is not worth it. It's not going to go well. There's always a different time to schedule things. There's always another workaround. So I think that's it for me as far as just being smarter about what I'm currently doing, because more and more and more opportunities are coming my way, which is awesome. But I just got to be smart about everything in general. And I've been trying to get used to now saying the word no. It's almost like this weird flip thing where before I forced myself to say the word yes. And that was kind of uncomfortable of being like, wow, I'm really throwing myself out there for trying to do all these different things. Like, I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if I can handle this. And then now, years later, I'm like, hey, you got to be careful here, or else your mental health and well-being is going to tank. So you got to be smart. Folks, that is all I have for you. If you made it all the way through, thank you so much. You are a trooper. This has to be the longest YouTube video I've ever made. I don't know how long this video is going to be after editing, but it's been a couple hours since I've been talking to myself in this room on this microphone. So it has to be a long video. So thank you. And overall, once again, thank you so much for being with me for this entire whatever, from the very beginning when you first found me, from the blog or the podcast, whatever it is. And then now with YouTube, the book, the courses, and everything else. It has been an absolute amazing and wild ride. I can't believe this is my life of talking with all of you. It has to be thousands of you at this point in time from all the social media channels and emails and everything else. Just, it's super, super cool. I have been so fortunate, so blessed to be able to do this. I'm going to keep on sharing with you. As long as you like this content, I'm going to keep on making it. That's always the goal. Well, hey, folks, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, safe travels. Hope everybody has an incredible time to be with their friends, family, and loved ones. And I'm going to see you in 2022, which is insane to say. Anyway, stay nerdy out there. Talk to you next time.